All right. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. This is the June general meeting for the Ventura River Watershed Council. We have two presentations today. One of them, the first one, will be a Watershed Resilience Project update that Jamie Whiteford will be providing. Which you guys have heard about several of the past meetings. So this will just be like a status update. Then we're going to have a break. And then at 9:50, we will be starting the status update for the Ventura River Adjudication update from David Ceppos. He'll just be providing information and kind of explaining where we are in the process. So with that being said, I'd like to get started with introductions. If we could put our name in the chat and just for my own like record keeping purposes, but if we could also just kind of go around and like briefly introduce ourselves and like why we're here, just because I see a couple names that I don't recognize. So that would be helpful for me. I'll start. My name is Heidi Ortloff. I am the outreach coordinator for Ventura County Resource Conservation District, and I also serve as the watershed coordinator for the Ventura River Watershed Council. I'll pass it on to you, Jamie.
Thank you, Heidi. Good morning, everyone. My name is Jamie Whiteford. I'm the Executive Director for the Ventura County Resource Conservation District. So I have the pleasure of working with Heidi as well as a bunch of great folks on our team. And I'll pass it to Dave Ceppos, who's going to be talking today. Sorry, David, you're muted.
Apologies. You would think a facilitator would have noted that. I'm Dave Ceppos. I'm the principal of David M. Ceppos, Public Policy Mediation and Facilitation. I'm the mediator of record for the Ventura River watershed case, and I'll do a more in-depth introduction of myself when we loop around to my point of the agenda.
Thank you. A.H., do you want to introduce yourself? No, we don't. Okay. Feel free, Age, to maybe put in the chat. I didn't see it. Brian Brennan.
Yeah, thank you. Brian Brennan, Director, Casitas Water District. Thank you.
Thank you. Anna Yip.
Good morning. Hi, everyone. My name is Anna Yip. I'm with Rincon Consultants, which is one of the consulting firms helping out the RCD and Lynn and Laura on the Watershed Resilience Plan.
Nice to see you, Anna. Ashley Kennedy.
I'm Ashley Kennedy with the Ventura County Environmental Health Division.
Thank you. Brian Bondi.
Good morning, Brian Bondi, Upper Ventura River GSA.
Thank you. Elizabeth Burns.
Hi, Elizabeth Burns from the Southern Steelhead Coalition.
Nice to see you. Jody.
Morning, everybody. My name is Jody Schweitzer. I'm the Water Program Director for Farm Bureau of Ventura County.
Thank you. Julie Clark.
Good morning. I'm Julie Clark with UC Cooperative Extension for Ventura County.
Thank you. Kathy Bremer.
Kathy Bremer, Friends of the Ventura River.
Lauren, my coworker, Lauren.
Hi, everyone. I'm Lauren. I work with the VCRCD as well.
Thank you. Leslie Purcell.
Hi, I'm Leslie Purcell. I'm with the Ventura Citizens for Hillside Preservation and Sierra Club. Thank you. And the Native Plant Society.
Mohammed Hassan. Mohammed. Maybe he's not ready. Summer from MOWD. Maybe she's not ready. Nathan's iPhone.
Hey, Nate Irwin with Santa Barbara Channel Keeper.
Thank you. Jamie, quick side note, can you please send the meeting link to Bruce Kubler? He just emailed me, but I'm in the middle of this, so can you help him send him the meeting link, please? Rhett from OVLC.
Hi, I'm Rhett Walker. I'm the grants manager for the Ojai Valley Land Conservancy.
Thank you. Roger Essick.
Hi, I'm a longtime local farmer and have been on the past board member of the OVLC.
Oh, thank you. Sarah Mulder.
Hi, good morning. I'm Sarah Mulder. I'm the Water Resources Manager for the City of Ventura.
Thank you. Tara Saylor.
Hey everyone, Tara Saylor, Ojai resident, student in restoration ecology and resiliency project manager at Blue Sky Center up in Cuyama Valley.
Well, thank you for joining us today. Tom Maloney. Maybe he's not ready yet either. Vivon, goes straight to you.
Hi, I am Vivon Sedgwick. I'm the Restoration Program Director at the Ojai Valley Land Conservancy. I'm also the chair of the advisory group for the Watershed Resilience Pilot Project. So, yeah, thanks.
Thank you. Okay, does anyone have any just general updates they wish to share about anything going on in their organization? Just brief updates. Yeah, Elizabeth.
Hi, thanks, Heidi. So I'm from the Southern Steelhead Coalition, and normally, from our previous grant, we just served Santa Clara Watershed and Santa Ynez Watershed. We are now going to be serving all the way from the area of Santa Maria to the Santa Monica Mountains. So that includes all of the watersheds between that Cuyama all the way down to Santa Monica Mountains. And so previously, we didn't technically serve the Ventura watershed, but we wanted to be a part of the conversation because we're like next door neighbors in between. But if anybody on this call would like to be part of the next Southern Steelhead Coalition meeting or be part of the meetings, and that's just literally you showing up to the Zoom call. I'm going to leave my email in chat. We would love to have people join from the Ventura watershed area, especially I think as somebody said they were from Cuyama in here. So yeah, we got grant funding to continue to run the coalition for about 2 more years, and we're really excited about it to include all these really cool watersheds in our coalition now. So I'll leave my information in chat and hopefully to see you guys on our next coalition meeting.
I saw that
Heidi.
social media announcement, Elizabeth, so I was really happy to see that.
Yeah,
Congrats on getting that extra funding.
Yeah, it literally happened we just got all paper in 5 days ago, so we're really excited to officially start. Thanks.
Yeah, it's great. Thank you. Does anyone else have any short updates they want to share?
Well, that's really great and would love to connect with you a bit more, Elizabeth. That's huge. And definitely aligns a lot with the work that we're doing at OVLC, so that's great. We'll have more that we can kind of discuss about this at later times, but we did just receive notice of a CAL FIRE award for the Forest Health Grant. And so it's a really great, huge opportunity for us to build capacity and put our watershed-wide Arundo removal permits to work, and basically take our work from where we're currently at near our Ventura River Preserve all the way down to Foster Park. So we're really excited about that, and we'll have more to share in coming meetings. So
That's also great news, Vivon. I look forward to hearing more about that. Does anyone else have any updates? Lauren.
Hi. I just wanted to say that tomorrow we're planning to do a broadcast burn, the Ventura County Prescribed Burn Association at Steelhead Preserve, which is an Ojai Valley Land Conservancy Preserve. This will be our first broadcast burn in the last 2 years and located in our Ventura River watershed. But we're also hoping to have some education components coming up. And we'd love some people from the Watershed Council to join. So please just like keep an ear out for an invitation to some after work hours good fire education event in our watershed. And yeah, more information will come.
Well, thank you. Does anyone else have an update? You can raise your hand or unmute. Going once, going twice. Okay, great. Jamie, are you ready to do your presentation?
I believe so.
Okay, great. So Jamie's here, as I mentioned earlier. He's going to be providing an update on the Watershed Resilience pilot project. Jamie's been involved in it. Yeah, you can take it away from there, Jamie.
All right, thank you, Heidi. Hopefully you can see my screen. Let me start share. Hopefully that's coming through okay.
Yes.
And hopefully everyone can hear me all right. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Jamie Whiteford. I'm with the Ventura County Resource Conservation District, as Heidi has already indicated, and as I stated earlier. So what I'd like to do today is offer an update on activities with respect to the Watershed Resilience Project, which is a Department of Water Resources funded grant that was provided to the Ventura County Resource Conservation District. And so the district serves as the grant administrator, but we are joined in the administration of the grant by our project managers, which includes Lynn Rodriguez and Laura Schellenbarger. In addition to the administrative team, we're joined by consultant teams, which are made up of Rincon Consultants, as well as California State University Northridge, along with CAUSE. And in addition to the administrative and the consultant team, of course, I'd be remiss if I didn't also mention that we're joined in this effort by our community advisory group, which is made up of members, volunteer members, I should add, of this Watershed Council's leadership committee. And then in addition to the leadership committee members who volunteered their time, they're also joined by other advisory group members who are outside the council to add a slightly different and more direct community perspective to this ongoing effort. I notice that there are quite a few people who have joined this meeting who may not be familiar with the Watershed Resilience Project. And so if you indulge me, I'd like to just add a little bit of context and background so that we're all on the same page as we move forward through this presentation. So very quickly, I just want to again reiterate, this is a Department of Water Resources funded project. It was awarded to 5 groups. We're one of those 5. And the objective of this Department of Water Resources funded planning effort is to identify and prioritize actions which will enhance the resilience of the water sector, in this case within the Ventura River watershed, but in other cases, other watersheds such as the Russian River, Pajaro, etc. And so again, the objective of this planning effort is to enhance resilience in the water sector. And when I mean water sector, what I'm saying are essentially our water system. So our water supply, our water quality, our water treatment, our water delivery. And again, this project is to enhance resilience in the face of climate hazards. And when I say climate hazards, what I mean is building resilience against things such as drought and wildfires and temperature spikes and flooding. And the reason the Department of Water Resources is interested in having this plan developed that explores actions that enhance resilience for the water sector is because they are hopeful that what we'll be able to do is articulate and identify and prioritize these actions, put them in a plan so that it's easier for the state to fund these projects because they know that they are prioritized and supported by the community with the goal of using this plan to accelerate funding to implement these actions. And so with that, with hopefully a helpful background on what the Water Resilience Project is all about, I'll move forward finally off of this slide into the next slide, which is just sort of an overview of where this conversation is going. Essentially, I'm going to provide updates on the advisory group activities. And again, the advisory group is made up of members of your community from the leadership committee of this council, as well as other entities who have joined us in that advisory group. We're going to touch on our community partner engagement. We're going to touch on some technical work progress between our technical teams and the advisory group. And then we're also going to touch on something that's very, very important, which is an event that's coming up. I'll give you a sneak peek. We have a forum that's coming up on July 30th at Camp Arnaz, just north of Casita Springs. It's a beautiful place. And this is our second forum. The first forum indicated that people who participated enjoyed the engagement, felt like it was beneficial and useful, and loved the location. So I encourage everybody to consider joining us on that date at that forum. Okay, so what I'm going to do is from here forward pretty much provide a recap of activities which have already occurred. So again, just to catch everybody up on what we've done and where we are. We had a meeting. This is the second meeting of the advisory group that was held May 19th. There was robust engagement, but we always want more engagement. So again, we hope people will participate in this effort moving forward. That May 19th meeting included a bunch of agencies, a bunch of representatives that got together, and the topics that were discussed included a previous engagement activity. There was a first forum held on April 30th, where we solicited a bunch of information from the advisory group members who were participating, as well as the other community groups who were participating. We talked about the water budget, progress and approach towards that. We also talked about climate warming levels, baseline warming levels, and climate metrics, all of which, of course, will feed into sort of the resilience planning for the water sector impacts, again, from these climate hazards. Our advisory group members were asked to provide input on these draft climate metrics and warming baselines by May 30th. And to sort of expand upon that, what we were specifically trying to get down to an advice from regarding global warming levels, what would be the approach there, what our planning horizons might be near term versus long term. And so during that discussion, metrics and baseline warming level considerations were provided by the advisory group. That input was received, and the metric selection by the technical teams is in progress, and there'll be updates on that moving forward. One of the very important considerations here was making sure that this watershed resilience planning aligns with ongoing efforts. So that was a major part of the conversation, was what other efforts are ongoing and how can we make sure that this effort aligns and supplements those efforts so that everybody is on the same page. Moving on to our network assessment, this is our community partners, and the lead on this is the CSU Northridge team. So CSU worked with the RCD team as well as our other technical team members to come up with a survey. This survey was distributed to our community partners, so that would be organizations, entities that are active and engaged within the watershed. So the survey collected information about the organization themselves, their existing networks and collaboration, because we want to identify any gaps in how people work with each other or how organizations work with each other, so that we can fill in those gaps and strengthen the overall network and make sure that we are getting input, feedback, and assessments from everybody. We don't want to leave anybody's thoughts out of this planning effort. We also collected information from those community partners regarding their water and climate resilience priorities and any actions that they were taking or considering, so that we have that as part of our planning effort as well. And that survey was launched May 9th, closed May 30th. There were 43 organizations that completed the survey. Again, we'd love additional engagement. We don't want anyone's voice unheard or unrepresented. So the results again. Not sorry. PT here. Hey, Roger, what's going on? Oh, sorry. Okay, so the results of this will help identify gaps and outreach strategies moving forward. And again, as I said, the CSU team is the lead. They're going to do analysis and network mapping from the results that were compiled when the survey closed. Okay, I'm going to circle back to the first forum. Again, I had mentioned this earlier because the advisory group sort of got additional information and feedback and provided more information moving forward from this first forum. And so this first forum was held April 30th. It was at Camp Arnez. We had really good participation. Thank you so much all who participated. And again, I encourage those who weren't able to participate to strongly consider participating on the July 30th event. We had a bunch of diverse representation. We had a bunch of very robust and diverse conversations. So it was very, very interesting. Interactive activities generated a bunch of input that'll all be valuable because it's helping to shape a draft vision statement for the watershed that articulates, what our concerns are and where our future lies. It also will inform the watershed-specific resilience problem statements. This will help, again, identify where we have needs and how we can respond to those needs in terms of water sector resilience against climate hazards. And I want to also take this moment to mention that all of the activities that we are engaged in and all of the deliverables that we're producing are all available on our website. In a moment, I'll post that link to the website so that you can go there. So if you missed something, you can go there. And if you would like to participate, you can go there and get a preview of what's coming up. The exit survey that we collected from those who participated sent, again, that it was a very engaging and informative and useful exercise. So again, please consider joining us. Your time will not be wasted, at least based on those who participated in the first forum. So updates from that, key themes were from that overall meeting were shared with the advisory group. There's going to be revisions to those outputs shared again with the advisory group moving forward. We'll come up with that final vision statement to be shared with the council post-summer. And we want to make sure that we give time for cause, our frontline community partner, to get broader community feedback before we finalize everything. So we're going to compile all the advisory group feedback from the forums, and then we're also going to compile the information from the frontline community engagement. The cause is going to be leading and come up with a final version that will be shared with all. Again, I just want to keep hammering on this because I would love to have more robust engagement, not just support of the project overall, but engagement in the process itself. So I encourage, again, attendance at the second forum. So please save the date, July 20th, 2025, at the beautiful Camp Arnez. It's a Girl Scouts camp. They have a wonderful facility there, plenty of room for everyone. And we have not finalized the date, but finalized the time, but we do expect that that will be in the afternoon, and that will be facilitated by our wonderful consultant partners, Rincon. Anna is here with us.
Jamie, can you clarify, is it the 20th or the 30th?
Oh, I'm sorry. Did I say 30? Apparently I don't have my glasses on. So it says July 20th and
It's the 30th. Sorry to
Yeah,
jump in.
I thought it was the 30th. I think that that's a typo.
Okay, my apologies for that. So sorry for the confusion, and thank you for confirming, Anna, that that's actually July 30th, not the 20th. So thank you, Heidi, and thank you, Anna, for that. Real quick updates. So we have finalized some things. So all is going well according to schedule. We delineated and justified the watershed area. We decided that it was best to constrain this initial pilot effort to Ventura River Watershed for a number of different reasons, which were all shared with the advisory group and the larger council at previous meetings. So we sent that delineation and justification to the Department of Water Resources for their final review. We're also working diligently towards finalizing, not finalizing, but getting edits and soliciting feedback on the watershed problems and challenges chapter, which is a critical component of the watershed resilience plan. So drafts being circulated. There's about 25 resilience problem statements. And again, these were all pulled together from feedback received during the forum and other meetings. And we hope to get this in front of the advisory group for review this summer. And then again, the council is the most important body with respect to final decision making. And so we'll get that to the council for review shortly thereafter. Again, continuing with the technical work updates. Regarding the water budget, the advisory group previewed the approach. This was a meeting. This is part of the last meeting with the advisory group. Again, we were looking to define baselines. This will ultimately be used to support climate vulnerability and future scenario planning, again, so we can have these resilience actions to implement. And then there's going to be further discussion planned at the Juneteenth advisory group meeting. So advisory group members on notice, we have a meeting Juneteenth. And then finally, climate metrics. Again, the advisory group discussed this and input received in March, and we're incorporating all that, or at least the technical team is incorporating all that moving forward. And engagement update, want to just shout out to Cause. We finalized their contract, so they're going to be taking the lead in terms of frontline community engagement. They're going to be doing focus groups in the communities in Westside Ventura. Again, their goal is parallel to the goals of the technical teams, which is the Cause team is going to be working with the frontline communities to identify community climate hazards, adaptation ideas, and their perceived vulnerabilities, much like we're doing with the community partners. There are going to be 2 focus groups, Spanish-speaking adults and English-speaking Latinx youth are going to be the targets to get feedback from. And again, the initial focus will be to inform adaptation strategies for the resilience plan itself. I'm pleased to announce that the Native Coast Action Network has joined the advisory group. Again, they're one of the outside advisory group joining the leadership committee members who comprise the majority of the advisory group. And so they'll be helping us with tribal engagement. So that's gratefully received. And then I really wasn't tracking time. Hopefully I was not going over. Hopefully there's time for questions. If there are any, I would appreciate the opportunity to address them. There you can see on the screen is the link to the project webpage. So again, you can go there. You can see the results of what we've done, agendas, slides, etc. You can also preview what we have coming up. And it also provides just a broad overview of the efforts and all the different tasks that are involved in them, as well as an overview of the team who are helping us in this effort. And with that,
I put that website in the chat already, Jamie, so you don't have to worry about that.
No, thank you.
And when the date for the next workshop, I know we set the date for the 30th, but the time is finally settled and we get all the final details. We will send that out through the mailing service that we already use for the Watershed Council to let everybody know. So just keep an eye out for that. It should be coming out soon.
Excellent, excellent, excellent. Thank you so much, Heidi. Again, thank you so much to the Watershed Council. I appreciate the opportunity to present on this effort. And again, I really hope that you find this effort to be beneficial to the watershed, and I hope that you feel inclined to engage in this process. It's very, very important. It's for the benefit of the council as well as for the watershed. And whether or not you're directly impacted, you certainly will be indirectly impacted by all the benefits that we hope to gain from this planning effort. And I also want to mention that if you're engaged in other planning efforts, it's really important that you engage in this one as well. You know, the water sector is not a singular thing that can be separated or disentangled from the other, communities that are part of this watershed. And so we always want to make sure that our effort, even though it has a sort of singular focus, is integrated with other planning efforts so that everybody is moving forward at the same pace and supporting each other along the way. So please, again, I encourage engagement. And in particular, I'll point out that July 30th, thank you very much, 30th upcoming forum. With that, I'll stop talking. Thanks, Heidi.
Thank you. If anyone has any questions, feel free to raise your hand or just, we're all adults. We've been doing this. You can unmute yourself. Okay. Not seeing anything.
Especially clear.
Yes. All right.
Wonderful. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Jamie. We will take a break, go drink water, do what you got to do, and we will be back here at 9:50 for the second presenter today. Thank you. Here we go. That's better. All right. So it's 9:50 now. We're going to begin with our second topic today. We have here with us today Dave Ceppos. He's working with 9 key watershed parties, the state of California, and hundreds of other defendants in pursuit of a mediated alternative to a groundwater rights-based adjudication of the Ventura River and water use in the associated watershed. I'm really happy he could join us today. So thank you, Dave. I understand you don't have a slide, you're just going to be presenting. So I guess you're welcome to take it away.
Okay, thank you. You can hear me okay?
Yes.
All right. Yeah, so thank you, Heidi. Thank you for graciously offering to or asking me to participate in this. As Heidi noted, I don't have a PowerPoint presentation. That's principally because this is truly a mediation, and so there has to be a great degree of caution as to what is put out in the public domain, and that includes written materials. So what I'd like to do is I'll just quickly introduce myself, a little bit of my background, not belabor it. And then I want to talk about what I can discuss about and what I can answer, and then frankly, what I can't discuss under, the context of mediation. And then I'm going to go into a history, and I'll describe a bit more what I think is germane and less germane regarding history, and then where we're at. And then I will open up the floor for questions and comments from folks along the way. And like I said, I'll do my best to answer things. So just by way of background, again, I'm Dave. Prior to last August, I was the director of Sacramento State's Consensus and Collaboration Program, which had historically been referred to as the Center for Collaborative Policy. And I was there for quite some time. In August, I left state service and started my own organization. The work that I'm doing began while I was still at Sac State in that role. I am a excuse me, a mediator, principally of natural resource conflicts. I also function as a facilitator, and frankly, those roles intertwine at times because all of my work is multi-party work, and so inevitably just the work itself, working with multiple parties, there frankly is an awful lot of facilitation that is done. But my area of specialty again is natural resources work, using what is commonly referred to as a multi-interest negotiating model, which any of you have ever read the book Getting to Yes, you would know what that is. And if you haven't read the book Getting to Yes, and if you're ever engaged in conflict management of any form and size, I strongly, strongly encourage you to look up that book, Getting to Yes. It's available online in a used format. It's like literally is the size of like a small, dime novel. And despite all the multiple books that are out there in the world regarding negotiation tactics and mediation, I would argue that Getting to Yes is probably the most elegant, meaning it's the most sort of pithy and right to the point of things. So I encourage that. It's just a general reading for anybody. I have basically had a dual career track my whole career, which is both on the conflict resolution side, but also as an applied natural resources manager. I have a very applied background. My original degree was landscape architecture with an emphasis in environmental planning, and I have a very advanced background in a range of natural resource factors, including water quality. I've done a significant amount of work historically on TMDLs, by example, total maximum daily loads, MPDS permitting. I have an extensive background in NEPA CEQA activities. I have a very, very advanced background under and even preceding the inception of Sigma. So I have a very applied background in that role. So I do not ever apply myself as a subject matter expert in those technical areas, but I believe that background brings an awful lot of content fluency to the casework that I do, whether it's on fisheries or water quality or remediation or whatever the case may be. So with that, enough about that. What I am here to discuss is the Ventura River Watershed Adjudication Mediation. That case is under court jurisdiction, and therefore this watershed is under court jurisdiction under an adjudicatory action. I am not going to discuss the legal history that led up to it. I may, in an ancillary way, do so a little bit, but I'm not going to go into details about it, principally to save time and also because I wasn't there. I wasn't involved in the early stages. I came on board as mediator in 2022. And I already said a little bit about what I'm going to cover. There are limits, and so what I can't talk about and what guide this is the following. This case is under mediation privilege under Evidence Code of the state of California. I'm not going to discuss, and I can't discuss current negotiated agreements beyond that which are already part of the public domain and have been publicly disclosed through the courts, or what I have been in a few rare cases been authorized by one or two parties to be able to speak publicly to. Likewise, inasmuch as this adjudicatory action is tied to the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act, or SGMA, as I referred to a little bit earlier, in that it is under the SGMA amendment adjudication clauses that this adjudication takes place under. I'm not going to go into great detail again about that, and for providing citations, I can do that offline, or I can direct you generally where to go to look for that, but I'm not going to go into depth on it. So my overarching role as the mediator in this case, and this case is clearly, if you're not already familiar with it, very unique in that there was legal action that was taken by Santa Barbara Channel Keeper, who I believe at least a couple of representatives from Channel Keeper are present today. And they were plaintiffs. The city of Ventura was a defendant. As a part of those actions, the city of Ventura did what was called a cross complaint. And again, I'm not going to get into details, but the bottom line of the cross complaint is that it essentially created a watershed scale level of defendants. Rough numbers are that there are 12,000 defendants or so. So you can imagine there really is no functional way to do a 12,000 person mediation, right? There's just not feasible. So some of the things that I'm going to talk about are how that works and how we are proceeding with this. I will say in that context that however cliche this may sound, I'm everybody's mediator. I'm the mediator for every person in this watershed that seeks to have an engagement in this. Now, I will speak more to that about how we did some differentiation and asked the court to take some action on some things, which they did. But the bottom line is that anybody on this meeting today, should you be a resident, if you will, a property owner or water user within this watershed, I'm your mediator. And I make myself available to a wide range of folks that I'll describe to you in a little bit. And so if you've not ever sought to avail yourself of my time and you wish to, I will make sure that my contact information is available, and I'll do so thereafter. As noted, or I guess Scott and I were talking a little bit in advance, I am mediator of record of a number of Sigma related and groundwater case mediations throughout the state. So there is some overlap that sometimes takes place with parties between those cases and this one, sometimes principally amongst attorneys. So history. Again, I'm not going to go back all the way to the litigation. When I came on board, a decision had been made by the court to offer a stay that had been both at the court's encouragement, but also at likewise the encouragement of a number of the trial attorneys at that time, with the idea that before this went to full-blown phase 1 and phase 2 and on adjudication trial proceedings, that there might be the means to mediate things. I think it's fair to say I certainly felt that perhaps we would have been able to have completed things sooner than we have, but that is what it is. At that time, there were defined as the initial mediation parties, or the IMPs, and those were the City of Ventura, the Casitas Municipal Water District. Gosh, it's been so long. I'm also blanking on who the 4 initial parties were. City of Ojai, and a group called the East Ojai group, or the EOG. Relatively early in the process, there were a couple things that I did. First of all, as an initial line in the sand, if you will, of my willingness to be the mediator. And I pass no judgment on this for people that are attorneys in this meeting. I want to be clear about that. But the case, based upon my initial review, had a lot of activity principally led by attorneys. And inasmuch as this case and a number of the parties were actual public agencies, I stated that I would really only be willing to act as mediator if we entered into a bit more of what I call a principles, PALS, not PLES, led model that then brought forward, when feasible, because of some of these parties are and some are not public agencies, that brought forward representatives, elected representatives, or appointed by those elected representatives from each of the elected parties, so that people with direct responsibility to speak on behalf of and make decisions on behalf of constituents were the ones that were at the table. We've employed that, and so the watershed, on the watershed party side, there are various elected officials that sit at the table, the mediation table. As Heidi alluded to, also party to the mediation is the state of California, which is both the State Water Resources Control Board and the California Department of Fish and Wildlife. I'll get more into the structure of how all that works. Anyhow, going back to upon inception of mediation, we structured things that way. I did what's called an assessment, which is a confidential set of interviews with each party, came forward with a set of process recommendations that we then employed, including developing essentially a charter, a governance model, and guiding principles, PLES. So we have principles, PILs, who sit at the table, and then principles of what are common interests that parties seek to employ. That's a fairly common but not dogmatic step that I do in mediation, so that parties, particularly in a multi-party context, all know that they're in fact heading in the same direction. it's a very detrimental situation in a multi-party mediation if you're moving along and eventually people start realizing that they've accidentally been sort of at cross purposes to each other. It is just a bad situation. After that, again, I'm not going to get into details, but one of the immediate next steps that took place was actually in September of 2022, when a request for action by the court was brought to the court, and that was to differentiate what we refer to as an exempt class of parties in this case. And that exempt class and some of the basis of that action actually resides within the Sigma amendments that I referred to earlier in the adjudication clauses. In this case and in that writ large, for those of you that are familiar with Sigma, you know that Sigma defines what are called de minimis water users, which is basically water users of a certain maximum annual amount that essentially defines them as de minimis. The definition of an exempt class was to allow some relief essentially for the 12,000 some odd parties that I spoke of, so that they did not feel and did not have to be compelled to be actively engaged in all aspects of the mediation and the overarching court case. In creating an exempt class, of which, I mean, I'm speculating this number, but it quite literally probably was, 99% and then some of the total number of defendants are parties that are non-exempt, or excuse me, are parties that are exempt. And again, are 5 acre-feet or less per annual use. And in this case, that can include both agricultural water uses and domestic. Sigma slightly defines it differently, but for the purposes of this, that's the general definition. At or less than 5 acre-foot per annum water use in the watershed. In doing so, what the real goal there, in addition to what I just said, was to give those folks some relief, was to create a non-exempt class. If you think the logic, if you create an exempt, then thus you're by definition sort of creating a non-exempt. And that non-exempt set of parties is the parties that are more than 5 acre-foot per annum. And what that allowed to do is, because again, that number of parties was quite less than 1% of total 12,000 parties, that allowed a couple things to happen. To be more expansive to a set of parties who really manage the lion's share and use or extract the lion's share of water within the watershed as individual parties, not cumulatively. And to create a place under which I could then broaden the table beyond those original 4 parties that I referred to, but not have it become so broad that it's untenable and unmanageable. There may very well be parties on this meeting today who have approached me and have said, I would like to be in the room in the mediation sessions, and I have respectfully declined. This has been discussed at the court. The court has continued to put, at least to date, his support behind my recommendations and decision. I do want to say that, the interesting dynamic of my role is that I'm not an arbiter. I'm not retired judiciary. This is not an arbitration. And so there is a somewhat unique factor in that I act as mediator. I'm there as a neutral party representing all parties. And yet I really have no authority. I mean, to be very blunt, I can't really make anybody do anything. The parties that engage in the way that they engage, save for going to the court and lodging a complaint, is purely voluntary, and going to the court and exclaiming, as I said, some people have done that and said, we wish to be at the table. The court has asked my opinion, I've given it, and the court has continued to defer to my recommendations. So at this time, as Heidi alluded to, there are 9 watershed parties, non-exempt parties, which means those parties have a use greater than 5 acre-foot per year. And those parties are the original initial mediation parties that I referred to. And then on top of that, an entity called Wood Clayson Foundation, which is Taylor Ranch, which is a major landholding, private foundation-based landholding down on the north side of the river, essentially what we refer to as the right bank, really basically near the very end of the river course before it goes to the ocean. That's one party. We have Ventura River Water District, Miners Oaks Water District, Rancho Matilaha Mutual Water Company, the county of Ventura. And then the other parties that I spoke of previously, which is City of Ojai, Casitas Municipal Water District, the City of Ventura, and the East Ojai Group. And I feel like I'm forgetting one of the 9, and if I do, I'll come back to it and remember it. As part of that effort, and based upon the court's action to create exempt and non-exempt parties, I then, using the available data that I had, which was principally data from the State Water Resources Control Board, use that, and when I say that data, that's, you know, the data that they had to indicate what their understanding was where various parties had certain levels of extraction in the basin. I reached out to all of those parties that would potentially be defined as non-exempt, and I asked each of them, do you wish to be a party in the mediation? They deferred. All these parties that I reached out to deferred. I maintain fairly regular communication with them at their discretion so that they're updated on things, and thus documented that the 9 parties that sought to be at the table as representative mediation parties were the 9 that we were going to proceed with. At any point in time, should another non-exempt party wish to come forward, they could do so, and under my rules of engagement, I would bring them into the process. There are therefore, like I said, other parties that have asked to be involved, whether they are individual landowners or in some cases organizations, and I've deferred that. And again, this has been tested through the court, and thus far that he's offered deference to my rationale. My rationale has basically been, in addition to the exempt, non-exempt, is parties that are actual water users in the basin, because at the end of the day, this is an adjudicatory action, which is either it will end up, if this mediation is not successful, it will go back to an adjudication, which I'm way oversimplifying this, but it's essentially divvying up and adjudicating every molecule of water in the basin to various, or groundwater to every party that is a water user in the system. That's the adjudication side. And so another litmus test I've used is, again, much to the consternation of some people, and I acknowledge that, that if you are not a water user under the adjudication action, i.e. a water extractor, then that's another variable that I factor as to whether you are in the mediation or not.
Hey, Dave.
Yeah.
Dave, do you take questions? We had a question come in the chat. Do you want to save questions till the end, or?
I'd prefer to save questions to the end. I'll try to speed it up a bit, but that way we can field it. And just my experience is that we might end up going down rabbit holes, and that I don't mean that comparatively to the questions, but let me just kind of finish the spiel.
Thank you.
Yes, it is. All right. I'm going through my notes here, what I want to talk about. Okay, do that. All right. So there have been really 2 formal actions taken by the court in this case under the mediation. One was that initial one that I talked about, which was in September of 2022. The outcome of this case, should it be a result in a successful mediated settlement, is what's referred to as a physical solution. That's terminology, again, that's used within adjudications writ large, and in particular under the adjudication clauses of SIGMA. The physical solution is quite literally that. It would be a document that defines a fundamental and comprehensive solution to deal with the case. Now, the interesting thing about this case is that it is an adjudication. That's, again, that's under the court's jurisdiction as such. The underlying factors were not only how consumptive water use was taking place in the basin, but how those consumptive factors, and in particular, a topic that is also under the auspices of SIGMA, and is in fact one of the 6 SIGMA indicators of sustainability, which is groundwater surface water connectivity. And the argument then being by several parties that groundwater extraction and use in the basin was thus limiting the ability of that water to make its way to the Ventura River and then manifest itself as flows. And those impacts to flows, such as they may be, then poses an impact to the aquatic ecosystem, and in particular fisheries and other species, and in particular in this case steelhead. That's, again, huge oversimplification, but just for expediency, that's the process. So while the adjudication is, again, ostensibly an adjudication of groundwater rights, if it were to go that way, the mediation is essentially an effort to circumvent that, to be quite blunt. And when I say circumvent, meaning rather than mediating the validity or lack thereof of claims regarding interconnected surface water conditions or the lack of interconnection, the mutually agreed upon goal of the mediation was, we're not going to debate that. We're not going to mediate that. We're not going to resolve that. What we're going to do is find alternative means, hopefully, to address these habitat conditions. And when I say habitat, I mean both, habitat which is riverine type habitat, i.e. adjacent to the river main stem, it's the river courseways themselves, but then also habitat as a function of the water, literally the water in the system. Water in a system is habitat. When you start talking about things like depth and flow and velocities and quality and things like that, that unto itself, the water column, is habitat. And so that is in fact what we are trying to mediate, and that is the basic content of the physical solution is, can we reach a mutually agreeable approach that deals with habitat in terms of physical habitat, flows, water quality conditions, be that water chemistry or temperature or all the above. It's incredibly complex. This has not really been done before. This kind of a we're not mediating the adjudication itself. We're not mediating things like sustainable yield and native yield and all these various terms that oftentimes happen with groundwater. And instead, we're trying to mediate a long-range habitat-based solution as an alternative to that, but then would still be under the court's jurisdiction. So, and then on top of that, the number of parties that we're dealing with is also makes things, again, rather complex. So that's the general goal. And that goal would be a mediated settlement at a bare minimum between the state, again, as the State Water Resource Control Board and CDFW, and these 9 mediation parties. And Channel Keeper clearly has a role in this, and Channel Keeper has been vested with a role by the courts. Channel Keeper has fulfilling their obligations and their mission of their organization, which is to be protecting the resource conditions and aquatic ecosystems and the fish. They have been very adamant to the court in terms of their desire for involvement. The court has been deferential to them to a degree. I think it would be fair to say that Channel Keeper and I have disagreed on a few things, and that's fine. I applaud their efforts and the work that they do. And so we involved Channel Keeper. There was a lengthy period of time where they were not involved, and they have been more involved of late, and that's in part due to this interim order that was acted on by the court in January, and I'll speak more to that in a minute. If this proves to be unsuccessful, if we prove to not be able to reach a physical solution that either is a mutual agreement by the court or some version thereof that the court chooses to throw its weight behind, this will go back to an adjudication, a true trial-based adjudication, and that is entirely possible. I'm not gonna put percentages on things, but we continue to plug away and try to make beneficial things happen, and we may be successful with a mutual agreements, and we may not. As I noted, the general goals are, like I said, habitat in its various forms, both riverine, let's say vegetative conditions, physical, what I would, many of you are obviously environmental professionals, so the term fluvial geomorphology will not throw you off, but sort of the geomorphological conditions of a creek, be the riffle pool complex dynamics or, those kinds of things. And then there's another layer to this, which is just the governance itself. Those of you familiar with adjudications, you know that a common term for adjudicated basins is that there is the designation of a water master. And the water master is the agent of the court. The court is not, any particular court is not going to be actively engaged in every single watershed that is adjudicated, of which there are God knows how many adjudicated basins in the state. So instead, you define what is commonly referred to as a water master, but under the Sigma amendments under which this is being done, that party is referred to as a management entity. And the management, and so that management entity has to have and uphold and be willing to uphold a number of responsibilities, which is both overarching governance, but then also what kind of levels of accountability they will or will not be willing to take on to hold parties in a particular basin accountable to a physical solution. And then certainly their responsibility as the agent of the court, which is reporting to the court conditions, be they beneficial or not, or positive or not, maybe is a better way to put it. So we are working with a couple of parties that, again, because I can't, I'm not going to disclose formally who those parties are, but there are two parties that we are working with that hopefully will formally agree to be the management entities. Actually, there's three parties. And again, for confidentiality purposes, I can't get to specifics. One is going to be a landowner specific model of a management entity. And we're still working out some of those details. The other two parties would be taking on, therefore, the lion's share of the rest of the footprint of the watershed. And quite literally, their jurisdictional responsibility would be, from watershed designation, ridgetop to ridgetop, basically from a contour, line-based approach, which is, essentially all land within that which is defined as the formal watershed. And then, of course, be providing oversight to all of the parties within that, whether those parties are exempt, which is I described earlier, or the non-exempt. Embedded in that is a whole set of factors as to long-range implementation of a physical solution is not free. It couldn't possibly be so. There will be responsibilities and projects to be implemented, whether they are flow-based or some other type of habitat-based, and all of those have incumbent costs. And so then, of course, a major question is, well, who's going to pay for all that? Is there going to be a fee structure? Who will be paying that fee structure? Is that going to be across the board to all 12,000 parties in a watershed, or only to a subset? And we do not have an answer for that yet. And that is, again, when I made myself available to a number of parties, particularly exempt parties who contact me, who understandably want to know, is this going to affect me, and am I going to have to pay money? And I walk them through as much as I can. And the bottom line answer is we still don't know. Frankly, we're not even done designing the physical solution and finalizing all of the elements that would compose the physical solution, like literally the physical activities part. And so because we haven't finalized that, we can't do cost evaluation. And if you can't do cost evaluation, then you can't go to a potential management entity and say, our estimate is that in addition to whatever your administrative costs will be for just, the bureaucratic management of a management entity, your legal fees and all the above, we don't even know what the collective cost of these things would be. We also don't know whether those costs would be intended to be trickled down to individual, again, fee assessed members of the community, or whether those costs would be picked up solely by individual organizations who will just take the lead on implementing certain key activities like a rundo removal, or again, a riffle pool restoration kind of a complex, or a low water crossing that might be posing an impediment to fish passage. These are all the things that continue to be worked out, while again, the way I sometimes visualize in my head and literally draw it up is it's sort of a Gantt chart, and there's multiple lines of activities, all of which are having to be resolved, whether it's governance issues or legal issues or physical, issues. These are all these things that are kind of marching along at various speeds, all of which need to culminate really roughly by, fall of this year. The court, and now I'll loop back to this idea of the interim order. So the court was understandably getting frustrated and essentially saying, I need to know more about what's going on. And under mediation context, there would be limits to what could be disclosed. And there was also a very reasonable concerns, in my opinion, I'm being honest here, by the state and by Channel Keeper, saying we want to know what some preliminary agreements are going to be and preliminary commitments by watershed parties will be. And so in that regard, in the fall of last year and then moving through to January of this year, was the development of an interim order. That interim order is a matter of public record. I'm not going to go to it in details, but it reflected initial commitments on contributory flows, initial and I should say, when I use the term initial, that doesn't mean necessarily that there's something else coming. But meaning initial, that it was in an interim order, which was an initial order acted on by the court. Parties may ultimately say, well, we put that in the interim order. We're not proposing to add any more in terms of commitments. So I'm not passing a judgment on that, nor am I saying that by referring to it as initial, there's something else coming. But nonetheless, there were various sections, articles, if you will, of this interim order that dealt with a range of things. So again, I can speak to that to some degree. So I referred a minute ago to low water crossing. There is a condition on San Antonio Creek, which is the Fraser Street crossing, which is it's referred to sometimes as an Arizona crossing. It's just a low water crossing. And it is believed that that low water crossing poses impediment to upstream mobile fish. So we're starting a planning process to start really better defining the problem statement of that location and what potential solutions might be used there. So that's one activity. Again, like I said, there were some initial flow commitments that were made. There was a commitment by the watershed parties to submit to the state what was referred to as is referred to as a counter offer. Now, the history behind that is last year, roughly around this time, when both the state was ready to disclose some information to the watershed parties under mediation privilege, and the watershed parties likewise were prepared to do so with the state, where we had sort of this transfer of documents. On the state side, it was draft revised flow targets that they had promulgated, and on the watershed party side, it was a draft version of a physical solution. Watershed parties had never responded to the state with a response to their proposed draft flows. Again, the only reason I'm disclosing and going through this detail is this is a matter of public record in the interim order, and so I can speak to it. So the state ultimately said, look, we think we've waited long enough. We would like to know what your response to our target flows are. And that was defined as the counter offer. And that was provided by the watershed parties to the state. It has since also, as part of court discussion recently, just a couple of weeks ago, that counteroffer has now been provided under mediation privilege to Channel Keeper, so they are now in possession of it, and likewise, Channel Keeper is under confidentiality agreement to the parties that it does not disclose. OVLC, who is present here today, Ojai Valley Land Conservancy, they have sought to have an involvement in some of the activities, in as much as they take a lead role in a rundo removal in the basin. They were named by name with their willingness to do so in the interim order regarding a rundo removal, and they have some other expertise that they would like to bring to bear. But again, they are not a mediating party, so they have also agreed to confidentiality agreement to potentially be a participant in what could be some future implementation of efforts that would be defined in the physical solution. So there are some parties who are involved in, I don't think ancillary is exactly the right word, because I wouldn't want to describe Channel Keeper's engagement as ancillary. They're involved in ongoing monthly meetings. But the point being that there are some of these parties and these actions that are defined in this interim order that was acted on by the court in January of this year, and then there are subsequent timelines on those interim acts while we continue moving towards finalizing, hopefully, this actual physical solution, which again, realistically speaking, it can't go any later till really the late fall, very early winter of last year, because the court in January confirmed that he was not going to extend a stay, nor I don't think we even asked him to do so, past April of 2026. So if you think about the work that still has to be done, and ultimately things have got to be ratified by a number of parties, be it the management entities who are not yet stood up, and therefore they don't even exist formally yet, as well as the other mediating parties. Realistically speaking, by late October, early November, accounting for review periods and ratification on various organizations, agencies, and whatnot, we have to be done with this by November, late October, early November, in order to then loop through to, getting this submitted to the court in March of next year, in order to have the court take action in April if everybody is in mutual agreement. As a part of that, and this is the last part I will say, any of you who have taken it upon yourself to review documents as they are submitted to the court, you will see that on a roughly monthly basis, or now quarterly basis, there's in addition to a report from the reporting entities, which are the state, the 9 watershed parties, and Channel Keeper, there's a mediator report that comes separately from me. It's developed independently by me. I have been consistent. I've never wavered in this, and I've made clear to all the negotiating parties that I will not ever waver from the following, which is that embedded in that timeline, because there are 12,000 defendants here, there has got to be a period of time, which I have continued to have to keep moving as this thing doesn't move as rapidly as I would prefer, where a draft version of physical solution must be made available to the general public. It must be the public must have an opportunity for review. The public must have an opportunity to provide commentary. We have to show that we've done our due diligence to be responsive one way or another to commentary that's coming, because again, all of these parties are going to be inheritors, if you will, of a court action. If there is a physical solution that is submitted by the primary mediating parties and the court takes action on it, all those 12,000 defendants are nonetheless involved in that, and as I said, inherit the outcomes. It is not appropriate for that to take place if said public is not given an opportunity to see that draft document, to provide some commentary. I have no delusion as to how difficult of an exercise that's going to be, but it is an obligation that I have, and I've made very clear from day one, and I stand by. So that is a commitment you all have from me, whomever you may be in this call, that if you are a member of this watershed and you are one of those 12,000 defendants, be it exempt or non-exempt, you're going to have your window of time before this gets submitted to the court to not only weigh in, to make commentary, and then to see how that commentary was acted on or not acted on, and why. That is my summary. I know it says you guys drinking from a fire hose. I could go on and on and on and on and on, but I will not. And instead, I will field questions at this time.
Thank you. The first question we got is, how is the County of Ventura drawn into the adjudication, not being a water user / manager?
Well, they actually are a water user through their Soul Park, their facility, or the Soul Park, which is up adjacent to Ojai. So they are in that regard. And then so that's from a water use perspective, they are. And then obviously from a governance perspective, there is absolutely necessary permitting for future projects that the county would be relied upon, whether it's through the flood control district or similar. So they have a necessary nexus to the functionality of items in the physical solution, and were they not to be involved, that unto itself could be a train wreck that would happen at a later date, which is a physical solution that agrees to certain activities, and then the county could at a later point go, we had no part in this, we never acknowledged a willingness to do X, Y, and Z, and that would be a reasonable response from them if they weren't given that. So that's the nexus of how they're involved.
Thank you. Is the physical solution subject to CEQA?
No. Now, I should say the actions therein would be. So, if you imagine, and much like, again, Sigma itself, and for example, the GSPs are not subject to Sigma. The actions within them are. So if there is a project to be developed, again, I'm not saying there will be a project at Fraser Street Crossing, but again, because that's a matter of public record, I can speak to that, right? There's an existing low water crossing. If there is something changed there, well, sure, then you're going to have 404 requirements, 401 requirements, SEPA, NEQA, CISA, ESA. You'll have all of those incumbent environmental compliance activities that would have to take place, because it would be a project that would have a necessary sponsor, and you would have contributory agencies as well. And so that's an example of where, you would. section 1600 under Fish and Game Code. So there's numerous environmental compliance milestones that would have to be met on a project by project basis.
Does anyone else have any questions? You can type it into the chat, or you're welcome to raise your hand and then mute yourself. Silence from people. Oh, Paul.
Of course, I can't remain silent. Hi, Dave. It's nice to meet you.
Likewise.
I'm a resident and customer of, I'm going to talk here. I'm a resident customer of Ventura River Water District, also on property that is a customer of Ventura Water, and a longtime student of the Ventura River Watershed. It's been interesting being on the outside of this and not knowing what's going on, but hearing rumors about the physical solution. And I'm kind of perplexed as to things like Fraser Road and other things that have popped up in there. You mentioned at the beginning of your talk, habitat is water. That's particularly true in the live reach, where which is what triggered this lawsuit in the first place. But you know, if you're talking about steelhead, if that's the issue, I think everybody in this room is aware that the primary barrier to steelhead is Matilaha Dam. Matilaha Dam is owned by the county. It's party to this adjudication, apparently. And the habitat that's necessary is blocked by these barriers. So something like Fraser Road, the question that then comes up is, what habitat is that providing access to? The responsible parties have failed to provide adequate passage at the Ojai Quarry. So North Fork Matilaha is off out of the habitat sphere. There's barriers on Gridley Creek, on all the other creeks in the East End. So it comes back to Matilaha. So if you want a physical solution without adding any water to the system, it logically ends up back at Matilaha Dam. And so I'm just wondering how much of the conversation that has been not being party to that conversation.
Sure. So I'll start with Matilaha Dam and then loop back to your reference to Fraser Street in your question. Matilaha Dam is absolutely part of the discussion. It is a challenging dynamic for a variety of reasons, some of which I'll to be again honest, I can't speak to, but the ones that I can speak to is that there's a general theory, and I don't mean theory as it being theoretical, just more maybe philosophy is better, but as a general philosophy or approach by the watershed parties, they certainly consider future actions in this watershed as falling under a before and after Matilaha Dam removal, because, you know, should there in fact be a Matilaha Dam removal, I think, you know, many of you know that the reason why there is a proposed removal of Matilaha Dam is the siltation that's taken place behind it, and its lack of functionality, if you will, as an impoundment, and that silt and sediment is obviously going to have to move its way through the system, and the estimates of the impacts therein and what that would do to the main stem of the system are pretty significant. I'm not going to go into details, but it's pretty significant. And because you do not have the same, but by an example, like I have casework in Klamath Basin, and so I'm sure many of you are familiar to some degree with the series of dam removals in the Klamath system, and also enormously complex. And yet you also have a hydrologic system there that is such of enough water that it can move those kinds of deposits through the system in a relatively short period of time. The same does not exist for this system because of the hydrology of the Ventura watershed. So that question of what happens after Matilija Dam and the impacts is a very big question for parties who might be looked to by other parties to implement restoration activities that then could largely or likely be obliterated by a post-dam removal situation for some period of time. So is that part of the conversation? It absolutely is. That is therefore all the more reason why some of the discussion and focus takes place about San Antonio Creek, because under current conditions, because many of you here are familiar with, and Paul, my guess is you certainly, they have what we refer to as the interim reach of the Ventura River main stem, which is this very coarse, cobbledy kind of an area there that you've got water that subs underneath that cobble. Yes, you have a thalweg of water course, but sometimes it's wetted and sometimes it's not. Meanwhile, if you think in terms of where some optimal refugia could be for fisheries, particularly steelhead, San Antonio Creek potentially offers that now. And as an example of sort of interim activities until such time as the dam might come down, San Antonio Creek is a very important tributary. So maintaining flow continuity from the main stem up to and through San Antonio Creek, if feasible, and again, it doesn't mean that flow continuity is feasible, but that's certainly a goal by the state, and thus providing refugia for steelhead. So then that transfers to, okay, well then if you've got conditions in Fraser Street, or excuse me, in San Antonio Creek that are impediments to fish mobility, such as potentially Fraser Street crossing, that's an example of why that facility is of concern. Now, there's not a formal yet problem statement defined yet. That's work that we're just launching right now amongst various parties, but that hopefully explains why San Antonio Creek is in the mix, why Fraser Street specifically is in the mix, the long range perspectives of some regarding the importance of before and after Matilija Dam removal. And, to your point, you made one comment about flow, about an if. There are parties, and I can't go into specific, I'm not going to say who, and I'm not going to say what, but there are parties that have, at this point, have already provided commitments of flow, be that contributory flow or flow that would be as a result of curtailment, water use curtailment. So there is an effort by some of the watershed parties to start addressing flow conditions. That does not mean that those flow factors are going to be sufficient in the eyes of the state or sufficient in the eyes of, say, Channel Keeper. I'm not saying they are or they aren't. I'm just saying that that's up for negotiation. That's the work we're doing. But I do want to point out that there are parties that, as per this counteroffer that I referred to, have now formally come forward and indicated some means of trying to enhance flow conditions. City of Ventura, likewise, in terms of changes at Foster Park, so and their Foster Park diversions. So I hope that speaks to the Matilija Dam question. I hope that explains why San Antonio Creek is of particular concern, and I hope it's better clarifying that there are contributions in one way or another that are being proposed to try to enhance flow conditions in certain places.
Yeah, just a couple of quick responses to that. San Antonio Creek dried up during the drought, and is impacted in other ways. I don't know what the intrinsic habitat value of that, what in terms of population is, but historically, steelhead have tried to make their way up to the headwaters there, and they can't make it to the headwaters, or the headwaters where the perennial flows are. You mentioned fluvial geomorphology early on. Ventura River has a tremendous capacity to move sediment. You mentioned the cobble and boulder reaches in the main stem. And, you know, the studies that are largely complete now have demonstrated that the dam can be removed and the impacts downstream would be temporary and ultimately beneficial to the habitat. So there's other habitat benefits to restoring the fluvial processes in the river.
Yeah, and I don't mean to imply that would not be the case. I mean, that would clearly be the case. It's just that there is a interim period of time, as you note, where you do have this sediment load. Clearly, the system is capable of moving massive conditions, as was evidenced in 2017 and 2023. But those are perhaps more episodic and flashy than other parts of the country where you get more persistent continual flows. So it's just the hydrologic nature of the watershed.
Yeah, well, thank you. I guess my point is that the dam removal is the physical solution. Anything else needs to be a flow solution.
Brian Bondi, I see your hand is raised.
Sorry, there's quite a delay here. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay.
Hey, Brian?
Maybe eventually we'll be able to see me too. I don't know. There we go. Hi, Dave. Thanks for the presentation. I think something that might be helpful for the general public would be if you could speak a little bit about how you see this process edge matching or integrating. I don't know what the right verb is, but a verb to describe how this process and the Sigma, the two GSPs, will harmonize. Maybe that's the best verb. And in particular, as a technical person, I'm curious about how, under Sigma, we're supposed to use best available science, et cetera, and how the science, I assume there's science that's being relied upon for the development of the physical solution, how those two will be reviewed and compared and made sure that there's consistency, so there's not a discrepancy between the science base that you're using to base physical solution and the science that's in the GSPs. Thank you.
Sure, you bet. I mean, Brian, you're putting me on the spot of a couple of things there, so that's fine. So in a nutshell, let me try to get to this. I should say all the watershed parties, I don't feel that I can speak specifically for the state, other than their statutory responsibilities, which is the following. There cannot be anything in the physical solution that from a technical perspective flies in the face of commitments made and the technical defensibility of commitments made in the groundwater sustainability plans of the two water subbasins or basins that groundwater basins that are required to comply with Sigma. So by way of example, maybe preaching to the choir here, but if memory serves me right, there are 4 groundwater basins within this watershed, 2 of which were defined as being required to comply with Sigma, that being what is now, I'm just going to go straight to the Groundwater Sustainability Agency, one of which is the Upper Ventura River UVRGA Groundwater Authority or Agency, and then the other is the OBGMA, which is the Ojai Basin. And Ojai Basin Groundwater Management Area or Authority, it existed prior to Sigma. Both of those entities have complied with Sigma. Both have submitted groundwater sustainability plans. Both those groundwater sustainability plans have been certified by the state of California, which means that the technical conclusions therein, the modeling that was used to come with those, and the commitments made are all now a matter of public record and are codified as to proceed. So the physical solution cannot fly in the face of or deviate from or threaten, frankly, the stipulations in either of those GSPs. Those activities by those groundwater sustainability agencies or GSAs plays a significant role in the eyes of the watershed parties because the technical analysis that was used, in particular modeling that was done, was also deemed technically defensible and sufficient. And so the state has their own version of a model. I'm not going to get into details on that. There is differing opinions between the state and the watershed parties about the efficacy of their model. And I've not ever heard the state weigh an opinion on one way or another regarding, say, for instance, UVRGA's model, save for the fact that the state writ large has sort of essentially thrown its weight behind and support behind and agreement behind UVRGA's modeling activities because the GSP was approved and certified. So there is a necessity to ultimately loop back in the hopefully not too distant future, certainly by the fall of this year, certain activities proposed in the physical solution and sort of test those through those GSAs. Those GSAs, however, are not party to the mediation. The parties are the parties that I listed off earlier. And so we are working on how to create a nexus through which the GSAs can be actively involved, can be subject to confidentiality under the mediation process while not being mediation parties. So that's the best I can describe to you, that there are efforts we are moving on regarding to harmonize, as you use that term, Brian, to ensure that there is not deviations between what is in a physical solution and what is in the GSPs. But there are some convoluted factors that I've just alluded to. I feel like I forgot one other part of your question. So if I missed something, please loop back to that and I'll try to answer it as well.
Just mentioning there's some activity in the chat of just sharing the website, the Ventura River Watershed Adjudication website. Vivon linked directly to another document I'm just opening right now. Looks like it's the stipulated interim order pending a physical solution. Would you say that's the best website to keep on track of everything?
Yeah. I mean, that's the matter of public record. So if it's there, it's available for folks to look at. If it's not, it means it's not been submitted yet, and there are limits to what I can speak to. And I apologize. I mean, I feel like I'm constantly apologizing to people in this regard, but it is what it is. I have an obligation as a mediator to protect, mediation privilege and confidentiality.
Yeah, we understand that. Does anyone else have any questions? I had a question, and maybe you did explain it, and I was like busy taking care of something else in the chat.
Probably didn't.
You said there's so for the state, it sounds like it's two separate departments in the state, Fish and Wildlife and
State Water Resources Control Board. They work, I mean, they have an obligation to function as independent organizations. Each has their own mission and mandate.
Yeah.
As a general rule, they seek to unify their perspectives before those perspectives are brought into the mix. And they do that. And they work together very closely, and I work very closely with their principals, individuals, and also their trial attorneys. They have both in-house legal counsel, and then they have their trial attorneys are actually from the AG's office. That I work with all of them. So yeah, those are the key state agencies. Yeah.
Does anyone else have any questions? Jamie.
Thanks, Heidi. Thanks, Dave. I appreciate that summary of all that you could share with us. That was great to get caught up. My question is related to what sounds like specific actions that are encoded within the current version of the stipulated judgment, such as a Arundo, for example. And I'm just curious what room there is for actions that may be taken that aren't perhaps codified within the current stipulated or final stipulated judgment. Is there the ability to do that? And then I also just would like to ask, with the formation of the management entity, does the management entity have any jurisdiction or authority or regulatory authority to allow those actions to or not to take place?
Yeah, let me parse that one out. Let me first ask, are you, when you talk about various actions that might take place, are you sort of speaking actions that are, I'm going to use a sort of a squishy term, you know, extra jurisdictional to the physical solution itself, i.e., I mean, I'm just going to use an example. Party X comes along and says, we would like to do X in the watershed. Are you asking, is Party X allowed to do X process in the watershed if it is not codified in the physical solution? And then if so, how that plays out? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, I'm just wondering if there were voluntary actions that other entities, organizations, or individuals wanted to take, whether that would be okay to do, you know, with the presumption that the conservation activities I'm talking about are to the benefit of the watershed. And you know, the riverine.
So I will answer this as best as I can. I don't think that a physical solution is going to put a prohibition on anybody doing anything any more so than there are already existing various forms of prohibitions, such as federal and state permitting and things like that. I believe that under to be determined mechanisms, there will be a necessity for parties to communicate and report to the management entities because of a couple of reasons. I don't believe that the management entities, although I can't say for certain, but I don't believe that the management entities are going to necessarily attempt to hold overarching authority over certain ideas, but they may very likely and probably would have opinions. So for instance, if Party X comes along and offers a suggestion of a project that is not documented in a physical solution, that doesn't mean that that idea is bad, but it could have an impact on items that are in the physical solution that are under court order to be implemented. And so you could have a management entity go, well, hold on a second, if you do X, that has X, you know, has Y opinion on us, and we can't fulfill our obligation if you do such and such. I'm speaking obviously in very broad terms. So I'm certain that there's going to have to be a process of communication. And then in that regard, again, for instance, it would remain to be seen whether the management entities were going to choose under their governance to define themselves as having overarching authority. I'm giving you my personal opinion that I doubt that that would be the case, that they would seek that. However, again, because Party X would have to come along and would have to comply with state and federal compliance activities, it would entirely be likely that if something was deemed as threatening, you could imagine that the management entity would be commenting on such and expressing to said party and to said regulatory and statutory agencies and probably the court that there could be a problem. So there's not a prohibition, but I think there's going to be a need for mutual communication to take place. And I think that that's going to happen ultimately through necessities that the management entities will be held accountable to for public disclosure, for public meetings, creating a venue through which the general public can not only hear the status of activities, but also, you know, offer up suggestions or things that are going on so that there is that communication above and beyond other forms like written communication and whatnot. So that's the best I feel like I can answer to right now. I hope that answers your question.
It does. I appreciate the sort of heads up for potential future scenarios. But if I may, I see Tom's hand is up. If I may, could I have another follow-up question while I have the floor?
Sure.
Yeah.
But I do want to make sure I field Tom's question too.
Of course. So I presume that there must be targets that the management entities are trying to reach in terms of demonstrating that this is a successful model in meeting sort of the needs of the watershed and the communities. And so I'm just curious if you can speak to what what timeline might there be in place for those targets to be reached before, or even if it would then head back into the adjudication process?
Well, okay, a couple so you're asking principally more about timelines, not the specifics of potential targets?
Well, I'm just assuming, as a presumption on my part, you know what they say about assumptions, but I'm just assuming that there must be some targets and some timeline by which these targets should be reached.
Okay, yeah.
Um,
Right, okay. So here's what I can say, and then to be very honest, there are numerous things that I just am not at liberty to speak to. Embedded in a physical solution will be both a management plan and an adaptive management plan. Management plan really referring more towards this commitment side of things, of when things will be done, and thus will be under the jurisdiction of the court. Adaptive management, i.e., as everybody here probably is familiar with, which is the means through which you monitor, you measure, you assess, and then you adjust. That is all part of the continued negotiation. So when I spoke of, the multiple layers on the Gantt chart, you can create 2 lines in there. One's a management plan, one's adaptive management. The specifics of both of those remain in negotiation. There are varying opinions as to what the management plan and adaptive management plan should define, what the starting points should be. There are differences of opinions as to what the functional targets and should be, with regards to particularly things, but not exclusively, but certainly things like flows. This is a part of the challenge when you have differing specialists, not only bringing forward differing, well cited and well opined, well defined opinions, but also the citations that they use, and when those citations are conflicting. I mean, many of you in this room might be familiar with the term combat science, and that's, in my line of work, that's what plays out a lot of the time. So reconciling that is the major chunk of the work to be done in the coming months. And then codifying that, and then sort of codifying what a starting point will be, codifying, and then of course on top of that is, defining at any given point in time what kind of a particular water year or water period we've had, right? And then and therefore weaving in what the ongoing hydrology of the system based upon climatological events, and let alone things like climate change. And so there's to quote the great Lebowski, there's a lot of ins and outs and what have yous, Jamie.
Well, I appreciate the elaboration and additional clarifications on the process, Dave. Thank you. And I'll step aside so we can get to Tom.
Hey, Tom, I know I owe you a phone call. I know.
That's really why I was raising my hand. But a lot of the Ventura County Resource Conservation District, other public interest organizations have received planning grants where they can enhance stream flow through voluntary projects. I don't want to get lost in the detail of all of them, other than there might be like an acquisition of land where there's some kind of adjustment to the past irrigated practices. And as you were talking about the stipulated judgment or the interim order, I would just encourage you to continue to reach out to the public interest community, because we're in a threshold where the state has Prop for climate resilience funding, and the inability for a clear accounting mechanism to show how the state can invest in the Ventura is a bottleneck to these dollars coming to the Ventura watershed. And I would just hope that as soon as the time is appropriate, there can be an understanding for parties who are not in the mediation that there's a significant non-litigation, non-regulatory solution, and it's called voluntary projects. And how we go, obviously it's all in the fine print, but the Ventura County RCD previously has proposed a production forbearance program, as well as other project types that, if implemented on scale, could add up to first hundreds, but then potentially thousands of acre feet in the watershed. And I would just, I know that we're not parties to the mediation, but please keep these considerations close, because we continue to believe that these are solutions that are good for the watershed, they're good for the community, and they steer us away from a curtailment scenario.
Yeah, and I mean, what I can speak, there's a lot I can't speak to what you just raised, but one thing I feel like I can speak to is, really in what I spoke to in Jamie's question and alluding to the management plan and adaptive management, is that there are things that can be committed to now and that watershed parties may or may not be willing to commit to now. And then by virtue of hopefully getting a physical solution in place with a management plan and getting management entities stood up and created, there are future activities that can then become increasingly contributory through partnerships and the like. And so it's sort of setting in motion some initial agreements that can meet muster initially, and then setting in place those conditions that can then allow for future partnerships and contributory actions in a variety of ways. So there's sort of a bit of this chicken and egg kind of thing that's tied in part to who the mediation parties are, but also what's being mediated. So I conceptually agree with you completely, and it's a challenge, and I know for some people a frustration in terms of when those are brought to bear and how they get documented.
Thank you.
Heidi, just to note for everybody, I just put in the chat my contact info, my phone number and my email, and I'm not meaning to sum up here, but just I wanted to, before I forgot, just draw attention to that, because as I said, I am the watershed's mediator. And so if you have desire to get more information from me beyond what you've heard today, or just to be in the loop, I have a number of parties that, for some, they reach out to me just on an as-needed basis when something, tickled their fancy and they wanted to touch base with me. For others, we have a standing, meeting schedule once a quarter, once every 2 months. It's entirely up to those folks. And I make that time, we put it on the calendar, and then and I'm available to you. That's my responsibility.
Thank you. Jody, you have a question.
Hi, Dave.
Hey.
Jody with the Farm Bureau. Good to see you again.
Likewise.
Thanks for that overview of everything, really detailed. I was wondering if you can kind of provide your opinion a little bit on a zoomed out scale outside of the Ventura River watershed. We have other adjudications going on in Ventura County, others going on across the state. I think a lot of people are watching this particular situation to see if this is going to set a precedent for other adjudications, or what you kind of foresee potentially precedent setting of this.
Yeah, with the caveat that what I'm now going to say is solely the opinion of me, Dave Ceppos. I'm not speaking on behalf of the Ventura mediation per se, or frankly, I am of a subset of parties at this point in time. So by no means a full set of parties, but for disclosure purposes, I am the mediator of record for the Oxnard Pleasant Valley case now as well. So again, I want to make it clear that from a Ventura County specific thing, I am not speaking on behalf of any of those cases. Yes, I agree that these are precedent setting. I think that the existing adjudication, Las Posas, is already precedent setting. And I think that Ventura River and then Las Posas and OPV are going to be precedent setting for different reasons. In the Ventura case, I think that ultimately, and I'm way oversimplifying this, I want to be very clear. But ultimately, I don't think that there's anybody, in the know that would dispute that the hydrology of Southern California watersheds and systems is markedly different than Northern California systems. And that is just an obvious nature of climate conditions, not climate change, just functional climate conditions. And so in that regard, solution sets for fisheries issues in Southern California systems must match the hydrology of Southern California systems. And so I think that in that regard, there's a possibility that Ventura River, should we be successful with a mediated solution, becomes a poster child for how these southern genetic population of steelhead and other fisheries are addressed, and how ideally mediated and negotiated solutions can come to bear, where you can have winning solutions, win-win solutions that are going to work for these Southern California systems, both because of not only the hydrologic differences that exist here, but also land use and land ownership. You know, if you go to certain places up and again, I'm speaking strictly to California, but if you go into northern systems, you quite literally have different land use functions. You don't have the land use pressures that you do in Southern California. You don't have the level of urbanization that you do, right? It's just a natural function of population conditions, be it agricultural land use, you know, to your organization, Jody, or the pressures between ag and urban land uses. You know, you go to the Trinity or the Eel, you've got, you know, thousands of square acres or miles of forested lands, right? And yes, there's land management activities that are going on, be it grazing or timber or cannabis, but it's not the same kind of land uses, and it's not the same kind of groundwater extraction. So all of which is to say, coming up with an approach that might potentially act as a poster child for how to reasonably and effectively mediate solutions that are going to work specifically for Southern California watersheds. I think that is a very real possibility. For OPV Las Posas, that gets into more complex legal factors. I think that what is at the heart of those cases and several other emergent cases in the state of California is the following. Sigma afforded through statutory conditions or statutory, you know, I mean, because it is a statute, Sigma has afforded GSAs, groundwater sustainability agencies, with the authorities to do demand management, i.e. managing water demand, which includes developing allocation programs. Now, the blood money, if you will, or the, you know, the sort of known challenge that was baked into Sigma was the inevitable challenge of what Sigma didn't do was Sigma did not change nor seek to make any adjustments to correlative groundwater rights. It's correlative groundwater, and I'm way oversimplifying, but correlative groundwater rights says that if I own my property, save for what is now defined in a GSP, I have the right to go take my water that's below my property, and I can extract that water as I darn well please. I can't do it, you know, erroneously per se, but I can. And therefore GSAs have the right to come in and say, but we're going to create an allocation program. And there are absolutely parties in the state of California who are saying, well, allocation is just adjudication light. Allocation is a means through which a local public agency is allocating water use, not ostensibly affecting our correlative groundwater rights. But what's the difference? This is being clearly tested in the courts, and it's going to continue being tested in the courts. And what's ultimately going to play out is a test of what those authorities in fact are, is my personal opinion, that are held by GSAs, and whether GSAs have the authority. And embedded in that, then ultimately is this question of what is an appropriate means to define effective and appropriate groundwater use? Is it historic precedent, which is more of a historic model pre-Sigma, or is it a current approach, which is post-Sigma? And that's going to ultimately rely, in my personal opinion, and I'm not an attorney, but in my personal opinion, it's going to rely on where judicial precedent might start coming about, which is where are the courts going to land on whether they are deferring to more current definitions or more, you know, shared definitions of how water use is used, i.e. allocated, or whether it's going to defer to a, nope, these really shouldn't be taking place. That should reside with the courts, and that should be done through adjudication. So yeah, these are all very precedent setting. Nothing is quite baked yet, etched in stone. I don't think we have quite enough judicial precedent record yet, but it's coming. I mean, Sigma ain't going away, at least not anytime soon. So thus legal challenges are going to come as well. And so we're going to see this evolve over time. So sorry for getting very wonky, but you asked kind of a wonky question. So again, that's just my personal opinion as a professional that deals a lot with this. So I hope I answered your question. I can't hear you, Jody. You're muted.
I think you did as best as you can with preserving your privileges. So yeah, thanks, Dave.
Sure.
Does anyone else have any questions for Dave?
I do. Hi, thanks, Heidi.
David, on.
Hi, Dave. Of course, I've got a question for you. Don't I always?
Yeah, I was surprised you hadn't asked anything yet.
I wanted to give some space and think about, you know, all the great things that Dave gave us. So that was awesome. So thanks, Dave. Appreciate you coming and chatting with the Watershed Council. I think it's just a really great opportunity to, I think, get a lot of people on like just a general understanding of what this process even looks like. So I think just huge props. Thank you. Thank you for doing that. But I guess one thing when I, you know, looking at the interim order, 'cause I'm still wrapping my head around all the like nitty gritty of the verbiage of everything, but I dropped it in the chat, a link to kind of the proposed interim order that was presented to the court. And, you know, it speaks a little bit to flow and that, you know, things, you know, certain measures that had been agreed to and things to be discussed. And then it proposes what, like 7 or so habitat watershed like actions, right? I kind of look at it in those two forms. There's the flow part and there's the habitat component. When I like think of
That's reasonable. That's a reasonable way of defining it.
Thank you. Okay, good. I'm glad we're on the same page. Like, you know, that tracks. And so when I think of those two things, and if you can't speak to this, that's fine, but it's something I just has been in my mind a lot is, do you have any kind of idea of like or like a sense of the direction of all this, like the weight of importance of each of those things? Like, I think, you know, the weight of importance of addressing flow measures and then the weight of importance of addressing habitat measures and like those two things in comparison to one another. And then also like as a general person in the public, like what is like the next big milestone we should expect to see coming out of all of the like court findings that are coming out, right? Like, are we going to hear something that's a little more firm and final and resolved around those pieces in 6 months, in a year? Never. Just kidding, not never, but like, you know, while I'm still at OVLC, because I'll be here a long time. But you know, any thoughts on that? And if you can't speak to it, I totally get it.
Okay. You know, best I can say is that I don't feel comfortable weighing in with a generic answer on behalf, or not on behalf of, but as informed by Santa Barbara Channel Keeper, only because I haven't had the specific discussion with them. But I know that I can speak intelligently to general perspectives of the state and general perspectives of the 9 watershed parties that each recognizes and is prepared to recognize that there is a necessary role that both non-flow habitat and flow habitat play. The proportionality thereof is a matter of question, is a matter of the negotiation, and that's as much as I can say about that. But nobody has ever said, you know, water is important and shaded riverine habitat is not, okay, by example, or water is important, but enhanced riffle pool complexes are not. I mean, that's, you know, never come up. So that's the best that I can speak to. With regard to your other question, what the public can generally expect, you know, we have required quarterly hearings with the court now. We just had one a couple weeks ago, so the next one, August, maybe, I think. So from a standpoint of people keeping an eye on documentation, the web links that have been identified is probably your best bet for keeping on it. There is an overarching, but I do not manage it. I do not touch it. I believe it's managed by BBK attorneys, who is the attorneys to the city of Ventura. I know we have 1 or 2 city of Ventura people, I think, online today, and they may be able to weigh in and speak to this, but there is an overarching listserv that is of the thousands and thousands of people who not only have been contacted, but then I believe had done a due diligence act, which was to sort of reply to the original cross complaint, and then amongst other things, put themselves therefore in this listserv. And so then are more immediately contacted for any back and forth communication that takes place on behalf of the case to the court. I don't manage it. I don't touch it. So if there's a City of Ventura representative here online that can deal with that, and if not, I can try to find, offline the appropriate nexus, and Heidi, I can get that to you and we can figure that out. So if there are people here who are not receiving that kind of communications and do consider themselves to be defendants under the cross complaint, we can at least deal with that. In terms of broader, what the public can expect, save for general update communication as part of the, periodic court hearings or some other thing that might have, emerged that is unforeseen at this time. The next thing would be a public draft version of the physical solution, which, as I said, if I had my druthers, would be sometime in the early fall, because it has to be, because we have to leave the time to do that and then go through a legitimate, authentic public process where the public has an opportunity to weigh in on things, as I spoke to earlier, get all that dealt with, get the watershed parties in the state and other parties to sort of legitimately weigh what's been communicated by members of the public, pro or con, and then get a proposed final, ideally mutually agreed upon physical solution to the court for settlement and, judicial action in roughly April of next year. So the clock is a ticking, and I'm getting more bald by the day, and
Sounds like a lot of work to do and not a lot of time. Excellent. We'll be seeing you a lot, it sounds like. Awesome. Thanks, Dave.
Yeah.
Does anyone else have a question for Dave? Sarah from the City of Ventura. Yeah, she's saying she'll follow up with the city regarding the listserv.
Thank you, Sarah.
Yeah, thank you.
I was hoping you'd take the bait.
Yeah,
I hope this has been helpful. I mean, like I said, I know I have to speak in generalities at times, and I get that, and I know it's frustrating, but I hope I've been helpful, and if I haven't been, I certainly understand. and you can email me or phone me and let me know that I wasn't helpful or that you have more questions. So
no, this was very helpful to me. I had a million questions I was like afraid to ask people, and having you here to present has been very helpful to me.
Well, did I answer your million questions before they got asked?
Yeah, I just had a lot like what's going on, and I didn't want to, as the coordinator, I just didn't want to ask people questions that they might have to just take to their lawyer or something. So having you as a resource has been great and very informative.
Cool.
Cool. Thank you guys, everybody. Dave, is your presentation okay to, when I upload our meeting, is keeping your component, that your half of the meeting, is that all right with you?
Yeah. I mean, if I wasn't comfortable saying it out loud, I wouldn't have been comfortable having it be a matter of the public record. So yeah, I'd frankly prefer that as opposed to thus after this being hearsay of what the mediator did or didn't say.
Yeah, that makes sense. All right, thank you guys. So a recording of this meeting will be posted early next week, and that will be emailed out to all of you guys. And then our next meeting, let me look at that, June, July. Our next meeting will be on August 7th. So thank you all for joining, and thank you, Dave, for presenting. Thank you, Jamie, for presenting, and have a good rest of your day.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. Thanks so much, everyone.
Yep.
Bye.